Thank you. Our second item on our agenda is approval of a flexible agenda. Looking to my board members. Doug? Okay. Motion was made by trustee Doug Engelkirk and was seconded by trustee Magnata. We'll go ahead if there's any public comment on that item. Go ahead. Just talk loud. Whatever you want. I don't care.
That we not follow this format that they have over here. We were at the meeting last week at the lake, and they're basically limiting how much comment that the public can have. I would suggest that we follow an open mic, open comment. I don't think that last week's format worked well for the citizens. Okay. So I'm very much opposed to spending so much time reading and writing on Postit notes, copying down everything on the Postit notes, and then just having a few minutes at the end to talk about what they wanted to talk about, which is it being taught in the Douglas School District? That's their agenda. That's what they want to channelize us towards. But we each have things that we want to talk about on this subject, and their format does not allow for that.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take a vote of our trustees. All those in favor of approving our flexible agenda, say aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Is everybody here from our board? 7-0. No. Okay, we're going to move on to our open public forum. And what we're going to do is the board, if there is no action tonight, it's information only. And we are actually hoping we get information from you guys, the public. How this will work is we're going to discuss critical race theory. Depending on how many people speak this evening will depend on how long you can talk. The board will not take any action or deliberate toward any decisions on CRT. And we do have our same moderator we had last year. We're hoping to streamline it since we already did a lot of the work last time. And the next thing I'm going to do is invite up our superintendent, Keith Lewis. Thank you.
Keep it in there. Good evening. I am Keith Lewis. I am the proud superintendent of the Douglas County School District. And before we get started tonight, I just want to make real clear, there's a lot of misinformation out in the community, and there's a lot of people who may be here tonight to think that the board is taking a vote on whether or not Douglas County School District CRT. That is not even on our agenda. Concern came up about critical race theory. We wanted to hear our community. I have not had a superintendent one conversation with a single board member that we are considering implementing critical race theory in the Douglas County School District. So I just want to really be clear that we're not here tonight. The board is not taking action. The board is not considering implementing CRT. And I just want to be very upfront with you this evening about why we're here. So thank you. And I guess it's my job to introduce. And so in response to the speaker, we obviously determined the format as the district town hall meeting. We don't disagree that we want to streamline the process. And so tonight we brought forward a lot of the work that occurred at our town hall meeting up at George Whittle High School on October 13th. And so we will quickly review it, but our intent tonight is to provide more opportunity for public input so that, again, what the board's desire tonight is to listen to the community, listen to your concerns, and then determine what the next steps are. But again, the next steps are not whether or not we implement CRT in the Douglas County School District. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce our moderator from the University of Nevada, Reno Extension, Lindsay Chester.
All right, good evening, everyone. Oh, I got a really good outdoor voice, so Joe's gonna. All right, how's that? Is that better? Okay. All right, I'll do what I can. Okay. So what our plan is tonight, if you joined us last week at George Whittle High School, we had 3 questions. You were given a chance to write down as much as you wanted to. You'll have that opportunity tonight as well. You'll also have an opportunity for public comment. There's a sign-up sheet right over here where that gentleman is signing up. Add your name to it. When it comes time for that, however many names are on the list, we'll divide by time left, and then you'll each have, I don't know, whatever that balance ends up being. So if you're not,
plainly that speakers would be given 5 minutes to talk. So speakers came prepared to give speeches of 5 minutes. You, under the open meeting law, if it applies, I'm sure it should, would have no authority to change what you have promised attendees of this meeting would be available to them in this public forum.
okay, I will defer to Superintendent Lewis on that.
The agenda said up to 5 minutes, ma'am, so it didn't guarantee you 5 minutes. So, okay?
Okay, so I should go without saying, but I would like us to go over some ground rules just as a fun reminder. Let's be respectful to each other. Participation is expected. I would encourage all of you to participate in contributing more to the questions from last week, public comment, listen to each other. So if something has already been said or posted, you can just duplicate that. You don't necessarily have to speak again and duplicate all of that. No wrong answers and 1 person at a time. So is that something we can all agree on? Okay, well, that's what we're going to do. So at the table here are Post-it notes, pens and pencils. On each of these sheets here, we have 3 questions. Question 1, question 2, and question 3. The question is underlined in the red, and what is below it is what the group last week came to mind, how they answered it by contributing comments on Post-it notes. Tonight, I have Clint helping me kind of sort those. This is part of our process to streamline that time. He'll categorize what's up there by theme, and we'll see if there's any other unique concepts.
Sounds like you're talking through a mask.
I am. Well, let me, school board, do I have permission to lower my mask while I'm speaking? Okay. All right, is that better? All right. So on question 1, question 2, and question 3, you are welcome to come up here, see what has been written, what was written last week, what was discussed. What you see on the end here is also what the feedback that came about in public comment. As I mentioned, Post-it notes and pencils, pens are on the table here. So as you're going through each of these questions, you're welcome to put on the blank sheets of paper anything that you might want to contribute to what may not be up there or something else you would like to add. Are there any questions on the process?
I'm just wondering, because I missed the last meeting. And I'm wondering who wrote these questions? Why were these specific questions written? And didn't the audience, didn't the parents have more questions than that?
So he asked how these specific questions were chosen. When I was asked to help facilitate this event, it was meant, or it is meant to be a listening session. No action is being taken. It's not being implemented. So they just want to know what you think, what you understand CRT to be, and if you know specific examples of where it's being taught in the school. So if there's anything else you would like to add, public comment's a great place to do it. I'll try to capture all of that. It's also being recorded. Yes.
Now, I don't understand why writing on a piece of Post-it note, what I want to say to you is more efficient than actually my saying what I want to say to you on a microphone. This seems a waste of time for the audience that is sitting here, who came here because of a listening tour in which listening would suggest that someone is going to be talking and then someone is going to be listening to actual words spoken.
Well, I interpret listening as audibly and visually, so I can listen to what you're writing, I can hear it, you can all listen to each other. I don't know how many more opportunities you have to express your opinions. You can write them and you can sign up for public comments. So whether you disagree with the way I'm doing this, my apologies, but I am the facilitator and I do get to determine how we discuss it.
I can assure you, I can talk to you a lot more words, but I'm willing to write down on a small piece of paper.
Well, you don't have to write them down. You can wait until public comments. I don't know how else to, if you look around and see how many people are here, there's too many. So I don't want to burn up your time for public comments.
There's 15 questions that I made.
Okay? All right. So what we're going to do, there is not, if you choose to participate in the writing portion, fantastic. I invite you to do so and you're welcome to come up now. If you want to wait till public comments, that's your prerogative as well. So, last question. Yes.
Let's start speaking.
Okay. Too many to do the 5 minutes. So there's not too many. So is everybody? Well, the school board was wanting to understand what you all thought. All right, has everybody signed up that wants to talk? All right, is everybody signed up? Okay, yeah, I don't know what the school board will do with, okay, you ready just to go to public comment? Okay. Do you want me to run the list order? I'm just gonna get,
The 5 minutes, because the agenda says no more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
We may be here well.
all right, Denise, you are number 1 on the list. And then as a reminder, state your first and last name, please.
Okay, my name is Denise Perez. Please remember that tonight is not about educating the school district on CRT, but rather bringing to light the definitions and variations of CRT implemented in school districts across the nation. The goals of CRT are dumbing down education by eliminating competition, diluting learning, teaching, creating division, racism, and hate, and using key terms like oppressor, the oppressed, white privilege, white fragility, intersectionality, systemic racism, equality, anti-racism, collective guilt, affinity spaces, and spirit murder. But then CRT wants to elevate students' emotional status instead. We are creating a generation where pronouns and sexuality are far more important than actual life skills or intelligence. Keep in mind, Nevada is 50th in the nation for education. The left's woke ideological indoctrination of diversity, equity, and inclusion, terms used in the school district's personal development book for teachers, will not be tolerated in this community. Critical race theory is the poster child for Black Lives Matter and its self-proclaimed Marxist agenda to dismantle the nuclear family as we know it. The LGBTQ propaganda and more palatable version of CRT, known as social emotional learning, are used as training methods for the future social justice warriors. They are brainwashed and conditioned by our very own school systems. The use of equity versus equality, where meritocracy and striving for success are removed from society because somehow equality is unfair. CRT is a complete destruction of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Critical race theory is the Trojan horse of education because it manipulates us into intentional divisiveness, hate of America, and hate of each other. CRT is cancel culture. And in the end, all that is left is a Marxist utopia by design. Despite some vague definitions given of what the interpretation of CRT is, the authors of critical race theory were very, very definitive in their Marxist ideology starting in the 1920s. Create racism, division, hate, and equity. Equity steals from somewhere else and spreads the wealth. This is better known as communism. The authors of CRT, such as Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Angela Harris, added the concept of race to create definable oppression. And then boom, 1989, CRT is born. CRT teaches that whites rigged the system, and this negates everything that the Civil Rights Act stood for. CRT created fake racism, as stated by Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. Did you hear what I said? CRT created fake racism. In 2009, when the BLM movement really began, the best way to separate the classes was to call whites or conservatives racist, oppressive, bigots, and homophobes. When Trump became president in 2016, their crusade gained ground with the LGBT movement jumping on the CRT bandwagon as another oppressed group. In 2020, it really got legs with the death of George Floyd. And then everything from that point forward was about the rest of the world being oppressed and offended. But what is really happening is our school district teaching CRT, not at the level of Washoe or Carson. However, state standards were revised in 2018 as a result of legislative action that required multicultural standards be added. The multicultural, still on, includes social justice, which by definition is CRT. I am not familiar with if this is being taught in the school and at what level. And I'm not trying to point fingers at the school district. I'm just pointing out the language. We're not Loudoun County, Virginia yet, notoriously the most liberal woke school district in the nation. And for those parents unaware of why our own Attorney General has deemed us all domestic terrorists, let me enlighten you. In Loudoun County, Virginia, a parent was tackled and arrested for trying to defend his daughter who was raped by a transgender boy in a girl's bathroom. That same boy went on to another school and raped another girl. That parent was made to shut up by being arrested. I'm almost done. The school district, to my knowledge, is not allowing boys in girls' locker rooms or bathrooms yet. The LGBTQ policies, however, invite sexual predators, and their agenda is pushing the legislation and legalization of pedophilia. It is incentivizing perversion into every aspect of government-run schools. This social construct of gender fluidity, pansexual, transgender, and gender pronouns agenda, which yesterday, by the way, was National Pronoun Day, is a breakdown of the nuclear family and destruction of society. Yes, the discussion of gender pronouns is happening in this school district, not as part of the state standards, but each teacher creates their own curriculum. Every parent in this room should ask what their teacher is teaching their children.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise, for your words. One thing I just wanted to mention, we do have a full crowd here, and we do want to give you all an opportunity to speak. But if what you're going to say has already been said, we would appreciate if we didn't hear the same thing over and over again, possibly, because we do want to give everyone a chance. Otherwise, we may be here till tomorrow for breakfast. So thank you.
Okay, next, Virginia.
Okay. My name is Virginia Stritt, and I'm the Director of Protect Nevada Children, a nonpartisan activist organization that fights on behalf of students in the state of Nevada. Hope my 5 minutes isn't being used for adjusting the mic. Okay. Critical race theory has taken on a life of its own. Whatever it once meant when academics wrestled with the concept, it no longer is restricted to that meaning. Under the critical race theory banner, parents and community members are now rebelling against students being instructed on sexual identity, sexual behavior, social justice, or racial disparities embedded in skin color or culture from a one-sided radical political point of view. Here are some well-known truths supported by abundant evidence. 1, distorted, simplistic, and meant to convict the white race of ingrained racism, radical assertions are being taught in classrooms, business settings, and government offices across the country as factual. And these assertions call for actions, not mere passive understandings. These radical assertions show up in K-12 schools through educational exercises, class discussions, student surveys, classroom materials, teacher training, teacher-originated lessons, and district-wide mandates. Sometimes these mandates are top-down from those in higher authority over the schools. Sexual practice and identity education, again, from a radical political point of view that contradicts traditional family values, has been pushed into the mission of elementary and secondary schools through curriculum attached to the Common Core standards. 4, bureaucrats have created departments of diversity, equity, and inclusion that facilitate the teaching of these iterations of what CRT is currently regarded to be. It should be noted that these bureaucracies define diversity actually to mean segregation according to culture and skin color, equity to mean installing inequality as a means to level previous inequality, and inclusion to mean excluding anyone or any philosophy that contradicts the one held by the radical proponents of CRT. It is no wonder then that the parents in this district are alarmed, particularly when evidence of the invasion of CRT right here in Douglas County has been already produced. We know that the teacher training program includes CRT, and we know that student surveys solicit information on sexuality, cultural norms, and family structure and values. We also know that social emotional learning curriculum aligns with CRT and intrudes on what parents consider their territory in inculcating good morals and strong values to their children. It is my understanding that Keith Lewis has stated that this district has no curriculum it can produce for parents and the community to review with regard to CRT content. I find this unbelievable and even insulting, since the district some years ago adopted the SEL curriculum, and I'm sure paid someone for it. What did you adopt then, if it is in fact invisible? What a smarmy answer you have given us to suggest that it would even be a practical reality for any or all of us to go into every classroom and watch a day's instruction and supposedly glean from that CRT isn't being taught in our classrooms. It is, in fact, your job to make sure our children are being instructed properly and in accord with what this community expects. This district needs to ban CRT from showing up in any way, shape, or form in their classrooms. Our kids need to be educated, not indoctrinated. If such a ban means that the district must abandon the SEL curriculum it presently uses, so be it. A curriculum that teaches reading, writing, and arithmetic instead of one that has the school acting in loco parentis would, I suggest, be what the vast majority of parents and people in this community want, and it would also be what is in the best interest of our country, the community, its families, and the students themselves. I realize that what I am calling on you to do means that you would be facing off against the current will of the Nevada State Department of Education. But sacrificing our children to radical political notions that will destroy America and undermine its foundation built on the nuclear family shouldn't be something you are ever willing to do. Teacher training in CRT needs to stop immediately, and the district must make clear to its teachers that it does not support or condone CRT. While student surveys come top down to the district must adopt an opt-in policy rather than an opt-out one, so that parents have the control they need to manage their children's privacy and upbringing. We should not have to prove to any of you that critical race theory is in the Douglas County schools. You should have to prove to our satisfaction that it is not and never will be. Just telling us it's not in Douglas County schools won't wash. Thank you.
Garth Hickman?
Hi, I'm Garth Pintler, former teacher in the district for 21 years. And I just have a short statement. I don't know very much about CRT. Well, why don't you just let me talk? Okay? I get my 5 minutes too. I'm here today because I'm concerned that the highly orchestrated attacks against critical race theory are going to lead school districts to exclude important parts of American history from the curriculum and from our school libraries. Slavery and racial discrimination is part of our history, and although we've made many important strides towards providing equal opportunity, all constitutional rights to all citizens, and particularly equal protection under the law, we still have a long way to go. If we are to continue to make progress, it's essential for all students going through our school systems to learn this history and to understand how and where discrimination exists in our society today. The point is not to create a feeling of guilt, but rather to motivate students to proactively work to eliminate that discrimination. My fear is that states and districts will enact laws and policies, such as been done in Texas, that restrict history education to only particular documents and historical events in such a way that students will fail to understand important truths about our history. For example, the Texas law omits the 15th Amendment of the Constitution, which guarantees Blacks the right to vote, from their curriculum. It also explicitly eliminated from the teaching standards, quote, history of Native Americans, unquote. There are many other examples of topics omitted. The point is that rather than teaching comprehensive, thorough, and truthful history, the result is more like what is done in Russia, China, and many other authoritarian countries, where the history they receive is a sanitized version of history, painting a very positive picture of the government that is essentially propaganda, and the real history is lost. If the real history of America is not taught, then we end up just carrying on with the status quo, which is one in which many of our citizens are not able to enjoy the rights and privileges of being full Americans. I hope we choose not to go the way of Texas and some other states and countries. I don't support critical race theory, but I do support teaching a full, truthful version of our history and avoiding censorship of historical accurate materials in our classrooms and libraries. Only by gaining an accurate understanding of the real history that we have experienced in this country can we be equipped to help create a better future. So, thank you.
Martha Betcher?
Good evening. My name is Martha Betcher. I've been a resident of Douglas County for more than 30 years. We raised our child here, and I've also worked as an educator here in Douglas County and Carson City in the past. I want to extend my appreciation to our school board, Mr. Keith Lewis, his staff, as well as all the Douglas County school district educators my family have had the pleasure of working with through the years. Certainly the world we live in today seems to be pretty darn complicated and difficult. And I hope my desire is that this event tonight can offer greater understanding and not devolve into something that none of us wish to really be a part of. I also find myself looking out at the audience and feeling like maybe there aren't very many parents of school-age children in this audience. And I wish there were more. I see you. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming. To start with, I want to emphasize that my understanding of CRT is that it's basically a scholarly framework developed in the 1970s by academics, which seeks to understand how racism has shaped US law and how those laws have continued to impact non-white people in the United States. Recent current events, for example, the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor killings, have drawn close attention to racial justice. I'm sure most in this room are familiar with the organization Black Lives Matter and likely have some kind of an opinion about it. I'm not here to talk about BLM, only to remark that these events have been front and center lately. It must be pointed out that CRT is not a curriculum. Used to be, teachers taught from a textbook, and that was their curriculum. The knowledge and skills, curriculum being defined as the knowledge and skills that students are expected to learn. So textbooks provided the heart of what teachers were expected to teach. And now they have the requirement to produce learning standards and objectives that their lesson plans reflect each and every day as dictated by their subject area. So I want to say that again, CRT is not a curriculum, okay? Curriculum is the stuff that teachers teach to the students. I also want to just emphasize that according to CRT, racism is a system. I think things started getting messy when people began to lump the concept, and we've heard this already, of diversity, equity, and inclusion in with CRT. Both do involve race, but DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as it's called, is about providing students equitable opportunities and ensuring all students are prepared for the global society they are inheriting these days, where students will encounter people who are different from them. I'm here to say that talking about race in school and looking at other people's perspectives through history should not be seen as a bad thing. To quote a gentleman that works for the Holland Public Schools in Kentucky, his name is Taryn McZee, teaching young people how to be anti-racist should not be seen as an attack on American values. I think teaching young people about race and racism is not the same as teaching critical race theory. We're talking about American history. Racism and slavery play into history. We should be talking about it. Teachable moments, and the teachers in this room understand what I'm getting at. Teachable moments come from kids, for instance, reading books that touch them, like the story I have about a mom who struggled with her daughter crying over a book from her 9th grade teacher's classroom library. The book is called Warriors Don't Cry. It's a biography by a woman named Melba Beals, who was one of the 9 Black high school students who were the first to integrate Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. Now, this was after President Eisenhower decided to take action against the defiant Arkansas governor by simultaneously federalizing the Arkansas National Guard, removing that guard from the governor's control and ordering 1,000 troops from the United States Army 1001st Airborne Division stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to oversee that integration. The following excerpt that I'm going to read here is from a meeting between a principal and the student's mom, and she was expressing concern about her daughter's response to reading about this integration process. And it goes like this, and the mom's speaking. Well, I didn't know she was reading until one evening. She read a part aloud to me, and she was crying. She was crying. She said it made her sad to see what white people did to Black people. And she wanted to know why white people were so mean and why when George Floyd got killed, Black people were so angry. She said it was like, nothing's changed. Okay, I'm gonna just finish up this and I'll move on. Okay.
Adam Paul.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Adam Laxalt, your former Attorney General. How are you? Well, as a father of 3 children, it's important to rise for our children today. And in the coming days ahead. There's no question that we face a legitimate existential threat for the future of our country. We all know that, we all feel that. And critical race theory, however ways they want to cover for it or they want to try to cloak it, at its core, critical race theory is this concept that we are founded on white supremacy and we are a fundamentally, inherently racist and oppressive nation. This is an incredibly dangerous and false notion that they are pushing in this country writ large, and to push it to our children is absolutely unforgivable. Martin Luther King taught America and the world that we should not judge people on the content. We must judge people on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin. These concepts, and whatever ways they want to pretend like this is not what's going on, these concepts are wrong because that is fundamentally what they are doing. They're dividing people based on their skin color and their race. It's wrong, it's dangerous, and it must be fought back against. Because the thing is that it is absolutely true that there is no nation that's ever existed on the face of the earth like America. We were the nation that enshrined liberty and human flourishing at the core of our nation. We produced a constitution and a rule of law that allowed that to flourish here more than anywhere in the world, and still flourishes here more than any place in the world. And we must preserve that. So the reason this is so problematic is because the left is saying out loud what is happening here. They are trying to undermine the Constitution. They say it is the racist document. They say it is the source of all ills. They want to get rid of our Constitution and the rule of law that has made us a peaceful, productive nation for generations. We cannot allow that to happen. We must fight to preserve those institutions. That's what separates America from the rest of the world. Are you with me? The other goal they have, which they are marching down the field faster than we've ever seen, is this cancel culture and intimidating people into silence. To see the Attorney General of the United States issue that letter suggesting that the FBI should be working with law enforcement to investigate parents for being domestic terrorists is one of the most appalling overreaches of we've ever seen out of the federal government. I'm here to tell you, as the former AG, it's unconstitutional. He has no authority to do that. You must reject that, and you must continue to rise up and continue to show up as you've done here. Now, we have an opportunity to stand up for our students, and it was said at the beginning, there were too many of you. I submit there aren't enough of you. We need more. And I thank you for doing that. I call on this board to permanently ban critical race theory and all of its appendages. No games. Lead the state. Show the state that this county is going to ban this. You will force other counties to follow suit. We will start the domino to raise the temperature of parents that are rising up all over this country, because we will not let these people take our children. We will not let them indoctrinate them. We will not let them poison our children with this rhetoric. We will stand up for them, and I'll be right there with you. Thank you.
Annette Parsons.
Boy, how do I follow that one? A lot of what has been said is a lot of what has been said is what I was going to say. So I'll make mine pretty short. But I do want to encourage the board to stand up, like Adam Laxalt had said. Critical race theory has its roots in Marxism, and it has no place in our community. It has no place in our country. And we need to stand up for that. And for our students, they need to learn what America is all about, what patriotism is all about. And I know that teachers do a very good job. They love the kids, and we have some really good teachers here in this district. But we just really need to stand up. We need to stand up against this, the National Education Association, because I've also learned that they are that and the 1619 project that is all being tied together, and it's not the right facts of our American history. And we just, please stand up for our kids.
Joy Uhart.
I've lived here all my life, and I'm very patriotic, and I expect the same community to be that way too. My point is that we already have, like I learned in high school, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that speak factually and conclusively about our history. So I would just encourage the system of education to continue doing that good job and keeping this country great. And like what's already been said, the factual history of America be shared rather than teaching that subverts the long heroic progress. And I'd also like to say that I believe critical race theory is obviously using discrimination to somehow fight discrimination, which, how does that work? And like Mr. Laxalt mentioned, Martin Luther King earlier, this critical race theory is the antithesis of what Martin Luther King himself preached.
Craig Parsons.
Thank you for coming, sir. I'm Craig Parsons. Our kids were born here over 40 years ago, and nothing like what our teachers may be forced to put on these new kids now ever existed then. Our kids became very well-adjusted adults. Our grandchildren are very well-adjusted youngsters. And I want to share a story of mine that I had in the US Navy. I joined in the 70s. I went through an intense training and got into the US Navy SEAL teams. I was forced to go into a classroom of people of color, different cultures, ethnicities, and I was forced with this program that our librarian spoke of to say horrible things to those across the room, and they were told to say horrible things to me across the room in training for what they're putting as lipstick on the CRT pig to try to get along. Can't we get along? Can't we figure out why we hate each other? We didn't hate each other. We were best friends. But believe me, when we were told to say bad things to each other, bad things happened when we weren't in that room. And we all regretted it, but we were forced to do that. And I just regret that this kind of thing might be put in this county on our kids. So thank you.
Gary Bowman. Bowman.
I'm Gary Bowman, Minden, Nevada. I just want to recite a federal code number S 1232A, prohibition against federal control of education. It reads, no provision of any acceptable program shall be construed to authorize any department, agency, officer, or employee of the United States to exercise any direction, supervision, or control over the curriculum, program, or of instruction, administration, or personnel of any educational institution, school, or school system, or over the selection of library resources, textbooks, or other printed, published instructional materials by any educational institution or school system, or to require the assignment, or transportation of students or teachers in order to overcome racial imbalance. Well, this program is racial imbalance. You know, the school board knows it's controversial, or we all wouldn't be here. They wouldn't have been on TV for the last 2 or 3 months. This is the problem with taking government money. Money's come along with government programs as well, which this is. Thank you.
Sally Bowman.
Good evening. This is for each and every one of you here tonight. Listen closely. It's a poem, and I've had it for over 20 years. Thank you so much. Children of tomorrow. Children of tomorrow, I apologize to you on behalf of those in my time for the things we didn't do. We didn't stop the tyrants so your fate could be prevented. We watched them steal our freedom. By our silence, we consented. We didn't choose to circumvent the doom you've not escaped. While the Bill of Rights was murdered and the Constitution raped. Some of us were lazy, others too afraid to think about our children, the ones we have betrayed. I guess we were too busy to be concerned or care, to try to ease the burden of the chains we made you wear. We could have been good shepherds when the wolf got in the fold, but we watched the flame of freedom die instead and left you cold. We changed our great republic, which was forged in liberty, to a socialist welfare state we call democracy. I'm sorry we were timid, my selfish generation. We left you but a remnant of a free and prosperous nation. I'm sorry for our actions, like cowards we behaved. We could have left you freedom. Instead, you are enslaved. Children of tomorrow, descendants of our land, I'm sorry we allowed this, the fate you now withstand. The parents and grandparents that are here tonight urge you to stand with them and stop critical race theory, curriculum, and the funding that comes with it. It is an abomination and a form of brainwashing that has no place in our schools. Please stand firm and say no. This is our beloved America, not Germany, and we are not domestic terrorists. We are peaceful
and just want our concerns heard. We are not a racist nation, and other states have banned CRT. We need to be one of them. Thank you, Douglas School District. We appreciate the time to speak. God help us. I have 16 copies. If anybody would like one, raise your hand.
Jeannie?
I just want to mention that Sally and Gary Bowman belong to the Carson City group that meet every week on school issues, critical race theory. So the alliances that we can build up to fight with each other are there. And I'm very proud of the Bowmans for doing that. I also wanted to ask Garth, if you know Garth, if you know anything in the history books that you think hasn't been fairly presented. I noticed you didn't put that in your presentation. When I was a young girl and I read the history books about the Japanese incarceration during World War II, it might have been very brief, like a paragraph, and thank God our class got all the way to the 1940s, but it was an honest, short portrayal of that. So I don't know what you're referring to about textbooks not being fair on racial issues. Superintendent Keith Lewis has failed to be straightforward with us on the current existence and progression of teaching critical race theory in Douglas County. I'm going to talk to you later about some things we can do to help fight this, but I want to go on about this subject. It's being taught in Douglas County under the label of social emotional learning as racial diversity sensitivity training, which is meant to be the precursor to critical race theory. Once you are trained to believe that you must be sensitive to other people's desires, or else you are either an oppressor or an oppressed victim, then depending on which race you are, then you have accepted, as Adam Laxalt said, the illogical premise of critical race theory. How can you have one premise and then say that must make you this or that? That is stupid on its face. I don't even know why we have to be here to scream this. We must find a way to spread the irrational logic that leads to CRT. Superintendent Lewis is deserving this community because he is playing dumb and not putting up any resistance to the advancement of CRT training. In fact, he is denying the relationship between SCL and critical race theory, and he is forcing us to be the ones here connecting the dots. On July 20th, 2022, AB 261 will go into law in Nevada, and the Nevada State Board of Education will decide all the textbooks that can be used in Nevada public schools. Now, that is already a true statement for Nevada schools, but this is the caveat. The AB 261 mandates that all these textbooks have to accurately portray the history and contributions to science, the arts, humanities of racial, sexual, and religious minorities. Charter schools may choose different materials, but they can't digress from that list of required books that show this inclusiveness and diversity. So he knows that. He knows in July that it won't even be his problem because it will be the state board, which is made up of 7 people that are appointed by the governor and the 4 congressional House of Representative members. Keith Lewis knows that he'll be able to skate away from this responsibility because the state will take over. And I think it's been disingenuous that nobody's mentioned to us that the state is going to take over in July. So here's my closing about 2 things that we might do to frustrate this progression of critical race theory. I asked Keith Lewis for all the curriculum, and he said there wasn't any curriculums. Then he said, here's his curriculum director. Then he said, all the teachers have their own separate curriculum. I mean, I think that he's been gaslighting Tony Magnotta, and I think he's been gaslighting us. I suggest, as other people across the country have suggested, that we install cameras in the classroom. So as he suggested, we can see each and every class and we can see what they're teaching and we can see what their curriculum is. Then we should have a camera so we don't have to come every day to every class, but we can see it in the convenience of our house. We need to ally with other counties, as I mentioned, Sally and Gary Bowman, such as Carson, to establish policies that would lessen the state board's control over diversity educational materials. Gary Bowman, I believe, read the law that he read in his presentation, because I bet that's exactly the law that Carson City parents and citizens have decided to use to fight against the power takeover of the Nevada State Board of Education on these diversity textbooks. The citizens should immediately work with Superintendent Keith Lewis to ensure that the November school agenda meeting next month incorporates these ideas that I have suggested today to thwart the continued progress towards mandating the teaching of critical race theory.
David Nelson.
Good evening. I'm Dave Nelson, and what I wanted to talk tonight about is the fear that I have that we're turning a blind eye to what's going on around us in Douglas County. I think that everybody that's here knows what CRT is, and that we really don't want our children to be taught to hate each other. And I think that that is turning a blind eye to what's going on totally in our country. We're being told there's more than two genders in our life. This, I think, is anti-science. Totally absurd to say there are more than two sexes in the world. But we're being told this. We're being told that you have to be woke. We're being told that you can be canceled if you don't go along with the group. This is cultural revolution. Wake up. It's here. We're in the midst of it. We need to be concerned. We have to stop being afraid. We need to step up and say enough is enough. CRT is kind of founded on a book or a publication called the 1619 Project. It was a publication in the New York Times that stated that in 1619, a slave ship landed on the East Coast, a village purchased those slaves. That part of it is true, but the rest of the book is total lies. Number one, those slaves were purchased by the village. They took them on as bond slaves. Now, I don't know about you, but some of my early relatives came to the US as bond slaves in 1650. So I know there's such a thing as bond slaves. Somebody pays for your trip over, you work and pay off that debt. The villagers allowed these black people to work as bond slaves when they'd paid off what they had to pay the slavers for their freedom. They were let go. They were freed from the bond. The 1619 Project doesn't tell that story. It's all about slavery. It's about the United States being founded on slavery. Now, I've read the Declaration of Independence a few times, and I can tell you, we weren't objecting to Britain because of slavery. If that was one of the reasons, it would have been mentioned, and all the reasons that it was mentioned in the Declaration of why we have to reject Britain and go on our own. There's nothing in there about slavery being an issue. Have you ever noticed that when they talk about the Civil War, these people that are pushing CRT never mention free and slave states? We had free states. And a lot of those Caucasians that lived in those northern states lost their lives to free the slaves. Does that sound like a nation founded on racism, on slavery? I don't think so. So this whole thing is based on just a bunch of lies that they are selling us. I don't want to go through a cultural revolution. We know how Mao's went. Tens of millions of people starved and died because of it. I don't want that for this country. We have to stand up now and fight now. Every one of us needs to stop being afraid to speak out. We need to stand up and say, this is what I believe. This is what I want for my country, and we'll get it back, I assure you. Thank you.
Barb Mathers.
My name is Barb Mathers. I'd like to specifically address the parents and grandparents who are here tonight. Closer, is that better? Do we really want our kids' education to be 50th in the nation? Literally the worst in the nation. We need to be involved in every step of the way. We need to ensure that teachers teach the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, history. If we teach history, we're going to learn from it instead of continuing the process and repeating it over and over and over. Anything that is different from reading, writing, arithmetic, and history should not even be discussed in the classroom. I don't care what name it goes by: critical race theory, equity, inclusion, multicultural, anything diversity. If it is separating our children by race, by gender, by sexual orientation, it is wrong. It should not be discussed. Teachers are not therapists. They're not sociologists. They're not psychiatrists. I don't care what you call that either. That can go by lots of names as well. Teachers need to be teaching the basics, and anything else should be taught by the parents in their homes. Part of what we need to be discussing tonight as parents, as grandparents, as members of the community is getting rid of anything that doesn't belong in the classroom and bringing back in what does belong in the classroom. The thing that needs to happen is each student needs to, the teachers need to understand what the weaknesses and the strengths are of each individual student. Race and gender and all of that doesn't play into that at all. You need to look at each child individually and see what their strengths are and continue to help them grow, and see what their weaknesses are and help them in those so they can actually reach their academic potential. Anything else should not be discussed in the classroom. Again, reading, writing, and arithmetic are what we want the teachers to teach, and the parents get to do everything else at home. We as parents and grandparents need to be in the classrooms, looking at the posters that are on the wall, the flags that are on the display, and anything that the teachers have in the classroom that they're trying to teach the students, so we know what's going on in the classroom. And in order to do that, you have to physically go to the classroom. You have to physically be in the schools and aware of what the teachers are teaching in their classrooms. I am homeschooling my children. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 9-year-old, and I took them out 2 years ago because I do not agree with any of this. I don't want my kids anywhere near any of this. And we need to talk to the parents who are not aware. I have been deemed a domestic terrorist by many friends even, who say that none of this is actually happening in the classrooms. They think I'm crazy. They think that I have no idea what I'm talking about and this doesn't exist. We need to talk to the other parents and grandparents and members of the community and explain, this is happening. It's happened in Oregon and it's coming our way. We have a lot of people who are moving to Nevada because they're fleeing their states because of this kind of garbage. I don't want this in our schools. I graduated from Carson High in 2001. I'm very proud of Nevada. Home means Nevada for lots of reasons. And I do not want this in our schools. I do not want our kids learning anything that causes any kind of division. I'm very proud of our country. I love it, and I want our kids to love it too. please talk to other parents and help them understand this is happening. It is in our schools. We have teachers who are teaching our children to hate themselves and to hate each other, and we cannot have it in this area.
Karen Stevens.
My name's Karen Stevens, and I want to thank all the patriots and service people and grandparents, because I guess it's only supposed to be parents that are here, that chose to come out and speak out against CRT. I've lived here for 26 years. My children went to school here, and I feel like I have a right to speak out against it. So, someone mentioned putting cameras in the classrooms. I think if they don't want to do that, we can put cameras on our children so they can watch what's going on in the classroom. You can buy cameras on Amazon for a very small price, and the children can wear them because people are being lied to. They are teaching CRT in the classroom. And we need to think about, if they're going to progress with that, maybe we have to think about getting our kids out like Barb and home teaching and taking responsibility for our own children and not letting them be indoctrinated. Lastly, we don't know what's coming down the pike for sure, but the superintendents and the governor were meeting recently, and I'm betting they're talking about stabbing our children with a vaccine that we don't know what's in it. And we might want to think about what we might do if that comes down the pike. So just food for thought. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate everybody that came here tonight to speak out against the poisoning of our children's minds and bodies.
Keith Cole. Keith Cole.
All right, so I would just like to say good evening. My name is Keith Cole, and I am the Social Studies Department Chair here at Douglas High School. So I oversee and help with instruction and with lesson planning a group of 12 college-educated professionals on a daily basis. I can tell you without exception, we are not teaching CRT in this high school in our social studies classes. We're not teaching CRT. We are not teaching CRT because it is not a part of the state content guides and curriculum. When we go out and we are hired by Douglas County High School or Douglas County School District, we are licensed by the state of Nevada, I am required by the state to teach the state required content and curriculum. I'm not an independent contractor. I teach what the state content guides require me to teach. And I will tell you, having doing this for 28 years, over those 28 years, I teach the facts. I'm not up here to indoctrinate your children. I am not up here to brainwash them. I am up here to teach them the facts about American history as defined by those state content guides. That's what I do. Now, some may say, well, Keith, how do you know what is going on in your teachers' classes? Because I make an effort as department chair to go into my teachers' classes, and I see most of my teachers teach at least twice per month. I go in and do this because I feel that collaborating with my peers and my colleagues
And spending time in their classes gives me the best sense about what things I can help them do to better engage and teach their students. Additionally, I have administrators. We have 4 principals that are here in this high school and so in our classrooms multiple times each month. We also meet as a social studies department twice a month on our early outs, our professional learning communities. And at no time have we ever discussed CRT. At no time have we ever sat down and talked about what we need to do to divide students in our classrooms. That's not what we're here for. That's not what we do. We are not teaching critical race theory because it is not a part of the state standards and content guidelines. Thank you.
Bob Russo.
Good evening, Bob Russo for the record. Can you hear me okay out there? Okay. Closer to the mic. Okay. Here we go. Okay. You know, I can only imagine what our children must feel like. When I speak about children, I'm talking about children in general who are in schools where they teach critical race theory. They walk into the classroom. Imagine the confusion when they're being labeled as being the oppressor or the oppressed. Critical race theory is indoctrinating our children to make assumptions about people based on their color of their skin. Now, when I was growing up, that was called racism. No question about it. How are these youngsters going to develop meaningful relationships with people in their lives if they already have these preconceived notions based on superficial characteristics, skin color, color of your hair, you know, what type of earring you wear, things of that nature? It's going to damage them. There's no question about it. When Black youth are taught that they are victims held back in life by white oppressors, how in the world are they going to be able to reach their potential in life and be successful? And then you have white kids. They're being told that to succeed is a form of racism and white privilege. If they have these messages going on in their head, how in the world are they going to go forth and do the best they can and be successful in life? There's no way. All this stuff is going to, they're all victims. Doesn't matter what side you're on, they're all victims. Listen to this. In Cupertino, California, an elementary school forced 3rd graders to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and rank themselves according to their power and privilege. These are 8 or 9-year-old kids, for crying out loud. That's child abuse as far as I'm concerned. In Springfield, Missouri, a middle school forced teachers to locate themselves on an oppression matrix based on the idea that straight, white, English-speaking Christian males are members of the oppressor class and must atone for their privilege and covert white supremacy. I believe that CRT is undermining the progress that we have made in race relations in the last 60 years. People walked in the streets in the South arm in arm to end segregation. And what are we seeing in our schools today in college? We're seeing segregated college dormitories. We're seeing segregated graduation ceremonies. Hey man, this ain't progress. This is going back 70 years. We got to stop it now. And there's more around the corner. This is just the beginning, folks. Listen to this. Critical race theorist and UCLA law professor Cheryl Harris has proposed suspending private property rights, seizing land and wealth, theft, and redistributing them along racial lines. And critical race guru Ibram Kendi, he's a director of the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University, has proposed the creation of a federal Department of Anti-Racism. Get this, this department would be independent or unaccountable to the elected branches of government and would have the power, okay, that's the people too, They'd have the power to nullify, veto, and abolish any law at any level of government and curtail the speech of political leaders and others deemed insufficiently anti-racist. Hey, they have more power than the legislature or the president. You know what that's called? Marxism? It's China, North Korea, Venezuela. That's what that is. That's what's on board, folks, if we don't stop this. So if we really care about our kids, I'll wrap this up. If we truly care about our kids, any vestige of critical race theory or any type of Marxist propaganda, it's got to go right straight to the shredder. So we need to elect politicians that are going to do just that. No more fooling around with politicians that are wishy-washy. We need strong politicians that are going to stand up for America and get back to educating our kids in the basics of math, science, English, civics, the Constitution, so they can grow to love our country, appreciate the freedom that they have, be successful, and then be strong leaders, because someday they are going to be running this country. And I don't know about you, but I don't want Marxists running this country. Thank you.
Doug Engelkirk.
Hello, Doug Engelkirk, new school board trustee as of January. And I basically am new to the system, and I'm trying to figure out how to fight for what is right. And the reason I brought CRT before the board this summer was to get ahead of the issue before the state attempted to force it on our district, so we could have some sort of a consensus on what we want to say about it. I will say, I don't think it's extensive in our community, but my friend Paul here showed me some examples that it is in our community. And so that concerns me, but I did meet with Keith Cole and the social studies department, talk with some of the teachers. And I really think they're, in this county, most teachers are unbiased and trying to teach the truth. So I don't think we're there yet, but I'm trying to be ahead of it. So this November, we will be discussing CRT, and it's either for discussion only or for discussion and action. Now, there's some model legislation out there that I'm going to be looking at, and maybe we'll bring before the board. I don't know if it'll be resolved this November or not, but that's what's happening. And although I don't like board meetings going a long time, there is public comment there too at 5:30. So I'm kind of hesitant to say that. Anyway, I do want to say something about Keith. I think Keith is doing a good job. I think he's responsible for having these town hall meetings. So he's working with the community, trying to find out where we are. As far as us being required to teach the state standards, me being new to the school board, I don't know where we can stand up against this, but I'm certainly open for ideas, and I do want to fight against it. Now, I had written, that's not what I intended to say tonight, and I'm only going to say a few things that I thought are interesting about the whole CRT. If you guys remember 9/11, when all the progressives were running around saying you can't blame all Muslims for what happened, and I agree, you can't blame an entire people group. Most Muslims are good Muslims. All these things were out there. Now with CRT, for some reason, all whites are bad. We can't blame an entire population for a few bad apples, but that's what CRT is trying to do. So I think a complete history of America needs to be taught, and I think for the most part it is. I don't think there's a lot of whitewashing going on about the evils that have happened in our country. But CRT doesn't just teach the bad, it encourages division. It considers all whites as oppressors. It's the socialist Marxist method of destroying a nation. This nation is the greatest nation in the world, but those in power are trying their best to change that. Take a look at our southern border. If this is such a racist nation, then why are so many non-white people risking life and limb to get here?
Paul Jensen.
Good evening. I'm inspired by some of the speaking tonight. It's blowing me away. The only reason I'm here is because I'm a school librarian in the district, and I taught math here from 97 to 04. Came back to be around grandchildren. So last year, I just had a bunch of racist stuff dumped into my lap, and that's why I'm here. I just felt like I needed to say something. So because I'm not a speaker, I got a script. Oh, and by the way, this right here on my shirt is a link to a video that explains all the materials in detail. I made this video, so if you want to see the materials I've been exposed to in this district in a detailed fashion, it's right here. It says rebrand. Oh, sorry. Rebrand, trying to let you see this at the same time. Rebrand.ly, /CRT DCSD. If you go there, you can watch this video that goes into detail. All right. So anyhow, I was exposed to a number of materials, teachings that are present in the Douglas County School District that violate the Declaration of Independence, the intent of the Civil Rights Act, and the 14th Amendment. Today, I had the opportunity to talk at length with a history teacher in our school district. She let me know that teachers have been hearing in the news that they will no longer have the right to teach certain history standards if policies addressing CRT are put in place. She showed me all of the standards that social studies and history teachers have been concerned about. I read the standards, and I will tell you that if you're a teacher believing this, you are being lied to by the media if you think that anyone opposed to the racism that is part of critical race theory wants to prevent history from being taught. Any of the standards I read were about teaching history, the ones that she showed me. And of course, we're not opposed to teaching about slavery as it occurred around the world and in our country. It's simply not true. And after a long talk, we both realized that we're both on the same page. And unfortunately, there's not enough of those conversations going on. I think the mainstream media is so corrupt, it's polarizing all of us. And by the way, something else I'm going to look up that I don't get that Garth mentioned. The Republican Party was started as anti-slavery. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. The 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendment were passed by Republican legislators. So why Texas would not want to be proud and shout that from the rooftops doesn't make any sense at all. There's something else going on there, I believe. I'm going to take a look at that. Anyhow, about 9 states and many school districts have created policies that prevent racist teachings in public schools in relation to what's being called critical race theory. Here are the key tenets of those policies. The school district shall not direct or otherwise if you look at these policies in school districts where they've implemented these, you'll see it doesn't say anything about not teaching history, not teaching slavery in the United States and around the world. Of course, we want to teach about these atrocities. This is garbage coming from the mainstream media. The school district shall not direct or otherwise compel a teacher like me, like I have been compelled in this district, or an administrator or a student to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to any belief or concept that says, one, that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex, that the state of Nevada or the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist, is what I've been taught by this district, that meritocracy or the traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist and were created by a particular race to oppress another race. And this is a big one because I've been taught this several times in this district, that an individual by virtue of his or her race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Or that an individual is marginalized, oppressive victim due to their race or sex. What a thing to teach kids. You don't have a chance. Who believes that? How sick. These policies basically ensure that staff and students are not assigned characteristics or labels based on the color of their skin, which is consistent with the equal rights afforded to us by the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. This book, League of Super Feminists, is a middle school library book in the district. It was sent to the library as part of a contract that was in place before I started working at this library. It was a contract that was started the year before I started. I always order my own books. I don't use contracts like this based on student recommendation and what good books are. And I preview all of them beforehand. I didn't order this book. It came from the, as part of this contract. It's racist. It teaches that white people are oppressive. And then also this book. Watch my video. You'll see all this junk that's in this district right now, please.
Allison Gray.
Good evening. I saw from the little sign over there that said that critical race theory came in with the 1619 project. Actually, critical race theory came in law schools over 40 years ago. It is a concept taught in the study of case law, which has to do with how societal norms can affect the outcome of legal cases. And I'll give you two really fast examples because they're cases everybody knows about. The first one, Dred Scott. Now in that one, at that time, legally in the United States, a black man was valued at 60% of a white man. So the Supreme Court ruled that no person of African descent had any rights of citizenship and therefore could not file a lawsuit, vote, own property, things like that. So that outcome very much reflected societal opinion of that time. Later on, we had the Brown versus Board of Education, which ruled that white people are and black people are entitled to the same quality of education as a white person is. So that is what critical race theory is. It is not being taught in Douglas County because it is taught in law school. It is taught in the study of case law. What we're discussing here is not CRT. Now, if you have objections to all this stuff, that's fine, but please label it correctly and don't call it CRT because it isn't, because we don't teach law here. Until we get a four-year university and a law school, it will not be taught here. But one other thing I wanted to mention, one person mentioned about how schools here in Nevada are ranked right at the bottom. One thing you might want to think about on that is that schools at Nevada are funded at half of the amount of the average school in the United States. Not half of the good schools, half of the average schools. So you all might want to give that a little thought if you really want to improve our schools. There is a way to go about that and we can work on it. So that's all I have to say, but you know, I really would, I'm really
Please be
taken aback.
respectful. She's speaking.
Yeah, I'm really taken aback by how rude everybody is. I mean, come on, people, let people talk.
Marcus Zinke. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
My name is Marcus Zinke. I have two children in this school district. First off, I'd like to say thank you to the faculty and the district here for allowing us to do this. The dialogue is the most important part of any one of these concerns that you all have and that I also have. I will tell you, I am anti-CRT. I'm a conservative. I'm born and raised in Gardnerville, Nevada. It's a great place to live. And I agree with most of what you've all said. I'm here for that, but I have changed my tone. I have never heard or seen so many rude people in my entire life. You berate her for being a moderator because you think she's against you. She's trying to do her job and you berate her for what? You especially, sir, with the blue bandana, chanting up your John 8:47 or whatever the heck you said. Great. And always talking when someone else is talking, especially when you disagree with them, allowing people to have more time because you agree with their premise, but berating those that you disagree with. That is the problem here. You stand for that as much as I do, as much as everyone does. And that is the real problem. When did we become so divided and so upset with one another that we can't hear the other person's viewpoint? Understanding their viewpoint is the most important part in combating it. And if you disagree with that, then you have a fundamental problem with how the world works, right? I agree with everything combating CRT. I think that the book that is, from what I'm understanding, an optional read for the professional development, is that right? I probably can't get an answer. As I understand it, it's a thumbs up in the back. That is an optional read. You know what else is an optional read? Anything you want to try to read. That's optional. It's not being forced on people. Our kids are not being forced to learn CRT, and those that are against it, good. They have their own agenda and their own ideas. Those that are for it, let them be for it, even if you disagree with that. We can all disagree and still get along and have plenty of things that we can talk about, right? Is that a problem? Fight it, scream to the tops, but do so in a polite way, sir. Sign your name up and come fight it. Don't berate this poor old lady that was just here. Sorry, she is old. That doesn't sound right, but she was old. Don't berate her because she's telling you things, right? You have a county commissioner that stood up here and he got his facts incorrect. He's talking about the Revolutionary War. That was after, or the Civil War, excuse me, was after the Revolutionary War. We did have slaves. Jefferson, Washington, all of them had slaves. You guys fight for, let's keep Thomas Jefferson statues. Let's keep Lee statues, right? We fight for that. Don't erase history. And then my 7th grade teacher stands up here and says, hey, history is important. And because you don't like the history that he's talking about, you go, get him off the stage. Why is he talking? This is a ridiculous sentiment that we're even here. It was brought up because someone was afraid of CRT, and you're fighting the wrong people. Fight the state. You're fighting a county that, by the way, is in a state, yes, with the worst education. Our county isn't. This is Douglas County. My kids are getting an amazing education right now. And my daughter does bring home stuff that she says, you know what, Dad, this doesn't sound right. My teacher was telling me about Latinx. So what did you say? Well, I told her that in Spanish, when you don't know the correct gender, you use los and el, which is correct, which is the masculine form of the word the. And you say mis padres. Padre is father. It's also parents. And the teacher just said, well, we'll have to discuss this later. The kids that want to combat it will combat it. You as parents should be the ones combating this with your kids, right? And if it is a problem, go to Keith Lewis. Go to your kid's teacher. Don't come here and blast our county because something the state might do. Stand up for your beliefs like everyone else, but give everyone a chance to stand up for theirs as well, right? Is that so hard? Talk and yelling the whole time. Stand up here, sign up, get your 5 minutes and do it. Great. And here you are interrupting me again, right? You just keep interrupting because nobody matters but you, right? And that's the problem. Thank you.
Bill Holden.
Hear me? Can you hear me? I'm going to break this thing. I see a lot of people I know, and I'm glad to see you here. I'm an old man, so the young man over there talked about the old people. That's okay. I'll handle that. But I don't want to make a fool of myself, and there's a lot of really nice people here. I hate to say it this way, but we're getting fewer nice people in this country. I'm sorry to hear it. I'm a confused old man. I see so many nice people, and then I see so much that's breaking us up, dividing us, and our education is getting worse. I don't want anything thrown at me at this, but I was an educator. I'm still going out and subbing, and I haven't given up on the kids yet. We can't give up on them. But if they have to be subjected to a lot of this stuff that is just awful about, if I call the wrong pronoun for a child that wants to come out, or I do the wrong thing, or I say the wrong thing, or something happens, a teacher is a big target. And the students are being shortchanged in so many places. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad. I don't know if, is it working or? Okay. I don't want to be Peter Finch tonight because I'm Bill Holden, but I am mad about all this stuff. I'm really mad. And we need some really good people who get us back to what are good values. One of them's right in the front row here. I'm a big admirer of this man. There's some others that are in the room here that I admire as people. A lot of you who spoke tonight, I admire you. But we have a lot of problems in our country, and we have to get the things solved, the things that are uniting us instead of dividing us. And a lot of this that is brought on by these groups, they want us divided. They're using Hitler's tactics. They're using Hitler's tactics in Germany. Hey, and he had a focus group that he wanted to get rid of. And now there's a focus group in this country. If you're too rich, you're too this, you're too that, or whatever, what do they say? What is it, cancel you? Canceling us, how about we getting together and everybody helping everybody? And there's a lot of people still wanting to do that. There's a lot of people still wanting for everybody to help each other. And like the people who mentioned about Martin Luther King, I'm a history person. There have been some little history inaccuracies said tonight. There have been. And we don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes. So, you know, that we're supposed to learn from them. Well, we have a whole lot of new stuff that's coming out, and it's stuff that some other people have learned to divide us, to say we have our agenda. We're going to have this country taken over, and it's going to be what different? It's going to be okay. But a lot of this stuff that might be different, this level playing field, Hitler had a level playing field. And if you didn't like it, what happened to you? Hey, okay, I'll shut up here now. I'm making a fool of myself, but I love all you guys. I love you. I've tried to get hate on my, I don't want hate in me. I don't want hate in me. I want us all to try to get this country straightened out as much as we can, every day, one day at a time. Thank you.
Lisa Schaefer.
Hi, I'm Lisa Schaefer. This is my husband, John Schaefer, and our two children, who, as you can see, we are parents in the community. We want to first extend our thanks to the board for going ahead and putting this before the community to gather input. And we just hope that by the end of the evening, you will believe as a district and as a board that there is no place for hate here in Douglas County School District, and that our district should be a pillar of inclusivity, equality, and justice for all. While our community has been assured that critical race theory is not being taught in the classroom, the truth is that it is part of the professional development offerings for the staff. This book here, titled Cultural Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond, creates a framework that directly calls for educators to be aware that they are inherently racist and biased. It places blames on groups of people, structures, and institutions for the inequitable opportunities of people of color. It further demands that culturally responsive teachers be aware of the unearned privilege that some have while others have unearned disadvantages. And it is based purely on race, gender, class, and language. The author calls for educators to shift their mindset, to adopt this theory so that they can meet the needs of diverse learners. This is honestly nothing more than bigotry disguised and cloaked in academic theory, and it's unacceptable. Professional development will impact student learning outcomes. If the staff are instructed to adopt such theories and therefore put such theories into practice within the classroom, then our students will be directly influenced by this academic theory. To say that CRT is not being taught as part of the curriculum is merely semantics and a sleight of hand. The intention The intention of professional development is to directly influence classroom practice. The district is supporting and promoting CRT within the classroom with this staff's reading. Whether it is optional or not, if it's in the hands of staff and it's supported by the district, then they're expecting that to go forward and be implemented in the classroom. The terms equity and equality necessitate clarification in this context. For CRT, equity means guaranteed same outcomes. It removes merit, it removes hard work, it removes personal achievement from the equation. Equality means equal treatment. It means equal justice. It means equal opportunity for individuals to pursue their endeavors and to personally achieve it. And a lot of us here have quoted Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm going to do the same. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There is no place for hate in our classrooms, in our schools, or here in our district. And I call upon the board to take a strong and clear stand for inclusion among all individuals and groups, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of class, regardless of disability, regardless of language. All of our students are citizens and deserve equality. I do ask the board 2 questions. What do you value? What will you defend? And please be principled. Defend American and universal moral values and fair treatment, equality, and justice for all.
Good evening. I'm John Schaefer. I have 3 separate and related points that I want to share. I want to highlight how intellectually disingenuous it is when the district says that CRT is not part of the curriculum. Yet this book is part of our teachers' professional development reading list. This is indoctrinating values from within. The purposeful intent is to technically keep it out of the curriculum because they know how disgusting and controversial it is, while at the same time teaching it to teachers. The teachers then reflect this hurtful and divisive ideology to our children. Board of Trustees, Superintendent Lewis, the responsibility and accountability of this falls directly at your feet. Please unite us, not divide us. I also wanted to, point number 2, General Colin Powell passed away this week. He was a living embodiment of the American dream. He also espoused a very publicly spoken life against the ugly principles of critical race theory. I find his words incredibly relevant right now. He was speaking to graduates at Howard University, a historically Black college, and General Powell reinforced his foundational principles, beliefs, and deep love for America. He said to them, "You have been given citizenship in a country like none other on earth, with opportunities available to you like nowhere else on earth, beyond anything that was available to me when I sat in a place similar to you 36 years ago. My American journey made it easier for me to love my country with all its flaws and to serve her with all my heart. Racism is a disease of the racist. Never let it become yours. Never let the dying hand of racism to rest on your shoulder, weighing you down. Always let racism always be someone else's burden to carry in their heart. Believe in America with all your heart and soul, with all your mind. Remember that it remains the last best hope on earth. America is a family. There may be differences and disputes within the family, but we must not allow the family to be broken into warring factions." He concluded with this: how in the devil did I become Secretary of State, or a 4-star general, or a commander of the largest group of soldiers in the United States Army? General Powell was the American dream. He was not the dividing and vile embodiment of critical race theory. May his example of American opportunity and love of America live on. I want to conclude with this. We wanted to explain to our daughter what critical race theory was. This is a 6-year-old girl that's here with us tonight. After intently listening, she said, "That makes me sad. A girl in the other 1st grade class has brown skin, and I really like her." That is the unadulterated, immediate response of a child's heart. Do not bastardize that heart with the vile, disgusting, and purposefully divisive ideology of critical race theory. Those are not American values, and those are not Douglas County values. Thank you.
Rachel Jones.
Good evening to everybody that showed up tonight. So I don't know if everybody knows, but Keith Lewis sent out an email 2 days ago that says that CRT is not K through 12 curriculum. It is not part of Nevada academic content standard. It is not an adopted curriculum in our district, state, or that they are not aware of any plans of any state or local board advocating for the inclusion of CRT in our classrooms. Now, I have a different opinion regarding Mr. Lewis's statement because I've spoken to several students. My child's a student here. And they've shared their experiences with me of their teachers' comments and their actions as well. And I've heard with my own ears when my daughter got kicked out of school for not wearing a mask on a Zoom meeting of how the teacher was talking to the students and what she was talking to them about. So I have firsthand knowledge of what's going on in the classroom. Outside of this English classroom is also a poster outside of room 207 that talks about the gay-straight alliance, your gender and sex, so on and so forth. Go look at it, outside of room 207. Critical race theory to me, because we're here to let the board know what we think of CRT, is not the traditional civil rights movement, which sought to provide equal opportunity and dignity without regard to race. Rather, CRT and the training implement is a radical ideology that focuses on race as the key to understanding society and objectifies people based on race. The gateway to the CRT is a thing called the Social Emotional Learning Survey, okay? That's this packet right here. I don't even know how many questions it are. It's ungodfully long. There's at least 50, 60 questions. Some of these questions that they're asking is appalling. Question number 4, they took out this year because it asked our children how they identify. Number 6 says, what's your race? Number 25, all students are the same regardless of whether their families are rich or poor. That's division of our kids, them versus us. Number 26, that boys and girls are treated equally. Number 29, people of different cultural backgrounds, races, and ethnicities get along well at the school. These are the questions they're asking our children. They don't have any business asking our kids these questions, period. And it needs to stop. The next gateway to the CRT is what is the middle school questionnaire. And there's also a high school one, which is called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Again, that's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. But according to the CDC, it is called the Youth Risk, hang on, I got it here and all this stuff. Shoot. It's a surveillance. They call it a surveillance. That's what it boils down to. That ought to scare the living daylights out of everybody right there, what they're calling it. In this risk youth one, they left out the word surveillance. Why? Because they know it's bad. In the middle school, this is down to 10-year-olds. Question number 14 asks, have you ever been physically forced to have sexual intercourse when you did not want to? Here's number 20. During the past 12 months, did you make a plan about how you would kill yourself? Here's number 44. Have you ever used cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, or ecstasy? My God, my 10-year-old doesn't even know what sex was at 10. Number 53, have you ever been separated from a parent or guardian because they went to jail, prison, or a detention center? Who the hell in these classrooms has the right to ask our kids these questions? And you know what? They don't, They put these emails out there saying, oh, these surveys are coming, and they bury them amongst all the other emails that we get inundated every day. And you know what we have to do? We have to opt out as a parent. BS. We should get to opt in for your criminal questions that you're asking our kids. So if anybody wants an opt out, because you have to opt out by tomorrow, the 22nd, the school, I emailed mine in, they didn't even know where the hell to take it. They're, oh, I don't know. I don't know who to give it to. The other one, the youth one, said it give it to their English teacher. So you got to fill these out if you don't want your kids asked these questions being asked to your kids. And another thing that I would like to say, there's the teacher that puts this poster down out in room 207. She, oh, thanks, Linda. Go check it out. Really divisive.
Okay, I can't tell if it's initial and then a name or Mladen, M. Laden.
Given that you had difficulty pronouncing my name, obviously I wasn't born in this country. I was born in Yugoslavia, formerly, well, today is actually a state of Croatia, which is today independent. At that time, we left in 1960. I was 14 years old, but I knew what communism was trying to teach us, which was indoctrination, and it's exactly what's happening today. I would never dreamed this would happen in this country. Okay. Now, I'm fortunate that my children are not going to this school or this district. I fear for my grandchildren though, because they may be infected by this disease. Let's assume, well, let me ask this question. What is the purpose of CRT? Does anybody define the purpose? The only purpose is the division, destruction of the United States. That is the purpose, okay? But there is a key word in it, the theory. Now, I'm an engineer by training. Theory is something you suppose, and then you try to prove it or disprove it, okay? So let me show you how to prove that this is a complete garbage or fraud. Do you know what, in fact, one of the gentlemen already mentioned, so he stole my thunder. What is the most successful ethnic group that comes to the United States? Anybody know? Actually, it's Indians, which are very dark-skinned people. Next one is Nigerians, and next is people from the Caribbean, very, very black and dark. So that is one proof where everybody wants to come to this country. In fact, right now you can see it on the southern border. It doesn't matter what country, they're all coming in. Why? Why are they coming here? If we're so racist, we're so bad. When is the last time a black person left the United States to go back to Africa? Anybody tell me? So by that proof, this is a proof of your theory. Theory is simply false. Okay. Now, do you know who real racists are? The elites in our country. Do you know, for example, in New York City, there have been more black babies killed than have been born alive? Does anybody know that? Do you know how many black babies have been killed in this country? Anybody know? About 23 million black babies. That is racism. Okay.
Skip Brown.
My name is Skip Brown. My wife Kathy is a school teacher. She's taught up at South Lake Tahoe Middle School for 30 years now. Not only at the same school, but in the same classroom. Can we get a hand for Kathy Brown teaching in there? Social studies, civics, and world history. And she wanted me to mention that in her experience, in teaching of history, it's not whitewashed. It's not being dumbed down. They're not taking out the elements of slavery and these other negative things that are just part of our American experience. She thought it was important to mention also that CRT is a $200 billion industry when you wrap it all together, and that may speak to some of the things behind why it's being still promoted and why, unfortunately, we see such a growth in this industry. And she teaches at South Lake Tahoe, I mentioned, and believe me, she can attest to the fact that CRT is alive, well, and growing up there. Really moving. And I was with my daughter at a UNR Nevada Bound Day, our youngest, who's a senior here at high school. We had two others that went to school here. And we went to the General Assembly and then the liberal arts presentation. And about slide number 3 in the liberal arts presentation was the fact that liberal arts students were going to have to be subjected to a mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion seminar. Mandatory. Now, mind you, this is a seminar, but the next step is classes that will be across the university level that these children will be required to attend. And it's not something that we're prepared to just sit by and watch happen. I was thinking that this seminar was going to be an opportunity to sort of suggest to the school district and the administrators to be watchful, but I think that would be way too laid back of a position to take on this. These practices in California, inevitably, they seem to migrate to Nevada. And the fact that that it suggested that we're not implementing CRT curriculum down here now doesn't mean that it's not being inserted by other names, which other people have attested to. And, you know, on the national level in politics, I'm not going to bring a lot of politics into this, but you know that there are those in powerful positions that just want to look at Nevadans and go, oh, those backward Nevadans, can't they get it? Can't they get on board with what's really happening in this country with the progressive movement that's so enlightening? I would say some enlightening needs to be experienced on their part. I mentioned my wife being a wonderful, wonderful teacher. She never comes home to me in 30 years of teaching 7th grade. She's never come home to me and said, you know, that little Mexican boy said something I really liked. Or those black kids, you know, something they told me was, you know, this or that. Or those Asian kids, they were in so much trouble. They're just kids. Absolutely kids to her as a teacher. I made a couple of notes. I have here that CRT promotes the idea that all systems in America are deeply racist and inherently promote subservience of people of color. Well, this is an idea that, this idea of CRT is promoted, and this is so insidious, through our military. These are on mandatory bases, through the military, across our schools, in our universities, of course, through the media, in our political systems, and even in houses of faith. People are being subjected to this. I would say one race, human race. Would anyone disagree with that? There are absolutely so many people of so many different colors who would agree with that statement, one race, human race. I was raised on the wrong side of the tracks in a small town in Oklahoma. I mean, the wrong side of the tracks. My neighbors were blacks and Mexicans and American Indians. My mother always set 2 extra places at the dinner table so we could invite friends. And they were just friends. They were just friends. We lived together. We fought each other. We fought together. We mourned together. We cried together. We celebrated together, whatever there was. We just lived together, people of the human race. And it just seems so far-fetched that we've come so far in the other direction. CRT assumes and presents that while white supremacy is everywhere and that is evident in every American institution and system, and that institutions and systems of power were created and reestablished to enshrine white supremacy. Now, these statements that I'm saying, some of them sound like quotes because they are quotes. They're quotes from the 3 or 4 most popular books on critical race theory. They are, in fact, in some universities required reading, and no doubt in some high schools. And you can talk to me if you want the names of them.
Sim, Rowan?
Good evening. My name is Jim Rowan. I'm here delighted to see so many people so well informed about this topic tonight. Most of you have come here, you know what that's trying to teach, but I decided I needed to stand up and let you know what I noticed it's not teaching. It's not teaching merit. Now, why is that important? Well, I'm a retired Navy officer, probably the only battleship driver in this arena. But what I wanted to share with you and why I give you that background is that when you're on a naval combatant, whether you're in Vietnam, Afghanistan, or anywhere else, every commanding officer, and you other military folks probably realize this, they always have their A team. So when general quarters goes down, you know the guy driving the ship is on the A team. You know the guy down in combat is on the A team, as well as the guy that's running the engines. And each of those A team members have their A team. So that when we were over in the Persian Gulf and general quarters went down, I was either driving the ship or I was in combat running the combat systems. In combat, my A team was working with me. The very best guy on the ship that could handle the air search radar was black. He was there because of merit. The very best guy on the surface search radar was Chinese, because he showed the merit to do it. And on our weapons consoles, I had, I'm pretty sure he was Mexican, he might have been Jamaican, I'm not sure. But all of them fought together, as your quote from Colin Powell would identify, as a team. We were friends, and we were all doing the job that we needed to do to protect this country based on merit, not on CRT. I've had the privilege of being a principal in 2 different schools. And so I've had a chance to see a lot of things about curriculum. And I do appreciate whoever the person that made that comment about curriculum not being taught here and the semantics of that. I sure hope that that is true, that it is not. I remember that one of the things that has always been so important to me, as whether a student or a principal, was the fact that if you were to study your history, if you went back to about the 1930s here in America, do you know what the 2 most common textbooks were in our schools? If you don't know, it's McGruffy's Reader was one, and the Bible was the other. And I'll sort of conclude with saying that if we're going to actually be one nation under God, then we ought to give some very serious thought to putting Bibles back in our classrooms, and we'll never have to worry about CRT.
Jacob Vale.
This is awkward because I thought we were here to discuss the legal framework of the Harvard stuff and adding it to the classes, but I guess that's not what we're here for. You'll see that people like to play a lot of semantic games when discussing CRT, and that's a part of the process. So you got to think of it as more something that it's the way that teachers are evaluating their classrooms. It's the way they're trying to determine the equality of outcome. The diversity, equity, and inclusion program that they mentioned, that's trying to put in the hands of the teachers the outcome of the students. And it shouldn't be. What Bev said earlier, the teacher should be teaching the class. They should be teaching
the materials. And they shouldn't be caught up in trying to figure out how to manage the equality of outcome.
Sue Reyes.
Hi, my name is Sue Reyes. I'm a mom, a grandma, and a great-grandma. I do not want my children or grandchildren to learn this, what I call evil. A professor called Christopher Rufo, who is a graduate of Georgetown University and also a former Lincoln Fellow at the Claremont Institute of Study of Statesman and Political Philosophy, has a whole thing on critical race theory, exposing it and telling you the difference between critical race theory and what should be taught, and the semantics they use to change the word equity and equality. A gentleman brought up some of the stuff that's gone on in some schools, but I'll finish with what the rest of it is he didn't get to say. This is what's really going on in schools right now with critical race theory. In Philadelphia, an elementary school forced fifth graders to celebrate Black communism and to simulate a Black power rally to free 1960s radical Angela Davis from prison, where she had once been held on murder charges. In Seattle, a school district told white teachers that they are guilty of spirit murder against Black children and must bankrupt their privilege in acknowledgement of their thieved inheritance. Critical race theory is becoming an operating ideology in our public institutions, and it's not an exaggeration. From universities to bureaucracies to 12 to K, it is being permeated through all of our schools and universities. This happened in the FBI. They were holding workshops on intersectionality theory, which focused on critical race theory. A Department of Homeland Security was telling white employees they were committing micro inequalities and had socialized into oppressor roles. The Treasury Department held a training session telling staff members that virtually all white people contribute to racism and that they must convert everyone in the federal government to the ideology of anti-racism. I'm a little nervous, sorry. One of the things I want to ask the board is, if they support this in our schools, do they support public schools separating first graders into groups of oppressors and oppressed, which critical race theory will? Do they support mandatory curriculum teaching that all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism, which it will? Do you support public schools instructing white parents to become white traitors and advocate for white abolition, which they will? Do they want those who work in government to be required to undergo this kind of re-education? They're going to do it. How about managers and workers in corporate America? How about the men and women in our military? How about every one of us they want to re-educate? And there has been talk about sending those of us who don't go along with it to re-education camps like they did the Chinese in World War II. We also have several legislators are introducing bills to achieve the same goal of preventing public institutions from conducting programs that stereotype, scapegoat, or demean people on the basis of race. There are lawyers now that we can contact who will file lawsuits against schools and governments, agencies that impose critical race theory-based programs on the grounds of the First Amendment, which protects citizens from compelled speech. the 14th Amendment, which provides equal protection under the law, and the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, which prohibits public institutions from discriminating on the base of race. What they're teaching is racism, and that is racist to do that to our children. What we need to be teaching our children is about excellence, aiming for excellence, that you can work hard and you can achieve your goals, and it's not handed to you. You have to earn it, just like I had to earn where I am today. And I didn't have anything handed to me. I'm one of 11 children. My parents could not afford college, so we all had to work to go to college. And a common standard that challenges people of all backgrounds to achieve their potential. Excellence beats diversity every time. Thank you.
Nate Lysing.
Good evening. One of the nice things about being, Nate Lysing, sorry, Gardnerville, is a lot of things have already been said. I want to thank, first of all, the two deputies that are here. Thanks to Sheriff Coverly for having those guys here. It's really good to see. We're lucky in this community to have folks like that. I was raised here and I graduated Douglas High School when there was 200 kids in the class or in the school. A lot of my friends I grew up with were Indians. We're still good friends our whole lives. And we grew up not having any of those races, any of that crap. But one of the things that I want to ask about the critical race, who's in favor of it? You know, I just don't see, you know, what we can accomplish by that. And I had other things, and I'm not really good speaking in front of people, but a lot of the things that were said tonight are really, really good. And, you know, I hope we think about it before we start getting into this. Anyway, thanks.
Okay, we've got some of our friends on Zoom. Jeff Sparrow.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? I have no idea if anyone can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. This is pretty quick. First, I want to say I'm making no allegations that Douglas County School District is currently teaching and or promoting critical race theory. You say that CRT is not a K through 12 curriculum. Does that mean you're going on record as committing to not teaching CRT in our schools? You say that it's not part of the Nevada academic content standards, which Douglas County teachers are required to teach. Are you saying that if CRT does become part of the NACS, that it will become part of our curriculum? You say CRT is not an adopted curriculum in our district or state, and therefore isn't taught within DCSD. Again, are you saying that if it does become adopted curriculum, that it will be taught here? I think we all understand that you aren't formally teaching CRT currently, but what about informally? Every time teachers talk to students about systemic racism or white male privilege, that's straight out of CRT. CRT looks for racism in everything, which is a mission with no hope of a happy ending. Where we can all see CRT being practiced regularly today is in the anti-hate speech movement. How do they define hate speech? Any speech that doesn't fit their worldview or agenda, because that speech is oppressive. This is a direct attack on the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America, a document I hold in very high esteem. If you disagree with the concept of CRT or even teaching CRT to children, you are labeled a racist, even if you're Black. Ask Larry Elder if you don't believe me. If you decide you're going to join them and become an anti-racist, you better not be white. The interest convergence thesis of CRT says you are only doing this to avoid confronting your own racism. The parallels between Marxism, another movement I am strongly against, and CRT are striking. Just substitute the word class for race. But I'm really not here to debate the flaws or merits of CRT, but instead to try to make the school board understand that we parents expect you, the school board, to represent our desires for the education of our kids, not the state's. That's why we elected you. Us parents aren't always going to agree on everything, especially as more people move here and bring their own more progressive ideas with them. So we'd like you to concentrate on what we do agree on and consider to be your job. We want you to teach our kids mathematics, science, history, a passion for literature, all without the spin of modern woke political correctness. The curriculum shouldn't be handed down to you from whatever political party happens to be in power, but handed directly to you from us, the parents. Thank you.
Also on Zoom, we have Kat S. Okay, on Zoom, Casey Rogers.
Hello, Casey Rogers for the record. I would just like to say, first off, because it's been said in other board meetings across the upper part of our state, that CRT is not taught in Nevada. However, many people have already mentioned the fact that it is. It's taught at the University of Nevada, Reno. It's taught at the University of Las Vegas, especially in the liberal arts department, which includes anthropology, political science, and especially sociology. I happen to be a sociology student and specifically know what they're teaching when it comes to Karl Marx, when it comes to Marxism, when it comes to critical race theory, when it comes to oppression, when it comes to all of these things and how it's being sold into indoctrinating the youth that they teach with their own personal agenda. See, the origins of communism is a promise of a man-made heaven on earth when it delivered instead was a living hell, 100 million deaths. More research has suggested that numbers in that area are actually higher. In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death follow. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels set forth in the Communist Manifesto an ideology of struggle. In their own words, to abolish all religion and all morality. If you can't see that going on in our schools across the country, you are blind. This is what is happening now. It's dialectic materialism, which is the absolute idea that development occurs as a result of struggle and life is nothing more than matter. If human resistance is matter, then if human resistance is nothing more than matter, then life becomes expendable for the so-called greater good under communist doctrine. Except that communist definition of good runs counter to what normal people understand is as universal good. For example, I think most sane people would agree that famine, suffering, and genocide are bad, but the communist leaders, they've been reframed as success, even as necessary for the so-called greater good. The key to communism is to erase the pre-existing morals. That way, communism can displace traditional morals with its own code of ethics, or rather its absence of ethics. Their code is only obedience to the party above basic humanity. The party dictates what's right and wrong, and anything that challenges it is deemed wrong. Morality, faith, tradition, all targeted. Do you see how racism, oppression, and all of these things is to bring our country down? Equity is equality. It is used subtly to get its little way in. It doesn't have to be in your curriculum, you see, to be taught or used as indoctrination with an agenda. So, in closing, I'd just like to say, you have to think about this mask mandate with everybody wearing their mask. Is communism being used with this mask mandate, with the vaccines? Is it? Because I'm telling you right now, there is proof upon proof upon proof that masks do not work. And yet, you are all wearing it. Mandate is not law. My last question to you is, are you going to trespass everybody else in that room that is not wearing a mask like I was at the last meeting, Keith Lewis? For not wearing a mask that doesn't work. That is all I have to say.
Okay, back in the room, we have David Chapman.
You better move it around. And I will be giving you a tease of my closing comments, which will be directed directly to the Attorney General of the United States of America, the erstwhile Merrick Garland. That's a tease on my closing comments. While we still can, I'd like to lead you all in the Lord's Prayer. Anybody who would like to follow along with me, you know the words. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. I think that should be said every class period in this public government-run school system. It's not been said in 20 years. We're way past due, people. I'm a Yankee. I'm from Maine originally. I moved out here in 1980. My ancestors include John Chapman, the original Johnny Appleseed, famous ancestor, walked across planting seeds, and I found my way here. My family had 3 members who fought in the Civil War, one of whom died at the Battle of Little Round Top under the command of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. My pedigree as a freedom fighter for America includes my father, who is still alive and well at 95, and got commissioned in the United States Navy in 1953, having gone through OCS with Bobby Kennedy, one of the good Kennedys. I did 30 years service in the United States Navy, and then they threw me out. That's a joke. They make you go home. My son just got commissioned having graduated out of here 4 years ago, he is the youngest ensign in the United States Navy's history. We are not people who scare easily. We are the people who take off across a continent armed with a sack of seeds. We are the people who hold God and a cherished freedom in a reserve that is only able to be expressed with the most regard for our fellow citizens. We hold our truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That constitutional verse has another follow-on, that when a government becomes tyrannical, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to abolish that government. Now I'm going to walk over for my closing comments, and I'm going to approach that cameraman right over there. Don't worry, I'm not going to hug you. But I want Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, to get a good look at my face. I want him to see what freedom looks like. I want him to not confuse this face right here with any of these other domestic terrorists. Merrick Garland, you are an embarrassment to this nation. Merrick Garland, your future will not be in heaven. Dismissed.
Carol Benish?
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I want to first thank everyone for coming, the board, Keith Lewis, and our officers that are over there. My name is Carol Bennis, and I'm the granddaughter of grandparents that immigrated from the Ukraine, Bessarabia, actually to Rutino. In 1906, they saw the handwriting on the wall because the Bolsheviks were beginning to take over. And they had a long, arduous trip over. It took them 9 months because the captain absconded halfway in Liverpool with the money. So my grandfather had to stay there and work to earn passage to come to the United States. Anyway, Douglas County has always been a gem and a leader in education. And I hope it continues in that vein. As long as I've lived here, I have never seen any real division. I was secretary at Gardnerville Elementary School, the second one, so I'm an old lady. And, and I just saw the kids playing on the playground. There was no divisiveness. They all looked out for each other. I didn't care what race they were because we did have a multiracial school at that time when I was there. And yes, I do have a mixed multiracial family in my family, and we're all one family. We all love each other and we treat each other the same. We've never looked down on anyone. And I don't understand the CTR or CRT.
And please, please do not accept, excuse me, this CRT for Douglas County, and keep going forward and be the forerunner within the state and have other counties look up to us. Because although we're a small county in Nevada, we do have our rights. We do have our love of this nation, and we love patriotism. That's who we are. And I grew up in the Bay Area in Richmond, California, and my dad had a small furniture store in Emeryville. And believe it or not, around the corner was Otto's Bar, and that is where the Black Panthers began their siege in the late 60s. And my dad in the store, it was a blue collar neighborhood, mixed whites, blacks, whatever. And he taught us not to discriminate. He taught us to love everyone and to treat them all the same. And I'm not good because I'm getting nervous here. But before he passed away in 1968, and before he passed away, he gave me a book on Marxism. And he wrote on the cover of it, "Read and heed." And by golly, he was way ahead of his time, because here we are. Anyway, I just want to say thank you for your consideration. And I just appreciate everyone that has been here tonight. And I really agree with all of the comments, and they are all so true. These little gems here are our future, and we need to think about that.
Okay, back to Zoom. We have Jen Miller.
Good evening to all tonight. Thank you for this time to speak. I'm a proud native Nevadan and proud to be a Douglas County resident. I have a comment for Mr. Keith Cole. When the cat's away, the mice will play. I've witnessed teachers teaching their own agenda and trying to encourage students to hate a now former president. At the time, it was to encourage the hate on President Trump. You may say they teach what you want them to teach, but reality is, you are away, they will teach their agenda and their belief system. My question to this town hall meeting is, where is Superintendent Keith Lewis? Will he be speaking? Will he be giving a rebuttal? The majority of us tonight agree CRT and the precursor curriculum needs to be stopped being taught today. We know the negative, untruthful, and evil content it contains. This is for the school board. Can you guys please work on getting a forensic audit of all purchases on books, curriculum, both bought for teachers and students alike, reviewing of lessons taught and the review of submitted lessons. This would help us to see, in fact, if Keith Lewis is lying or if he's telling the truth. And furthermore, at what point, if we're going to continue to be lied to, when are we going to ask for a resignation of the Superintendent Keith Lewis and both curriculum and instruction directors, which are Melissa Rains and Rami Cronin Mack? In conclusion, please stand up and do not allow CRT to be taught or the precursor social emotional learning to be continued to be taught in our schools, pre-K through high school. Thank you for your time tonight, and God bless each and every one of you.
Back in the room, we have Mary Porter.
Mary Porter. I came this evening to be educated about CRT because I'd read about it, thought I understood it. I was maybe most captivated by comments by the director at school, at the history division, I can't remember the specific division, who indicated that he monitored his classes and could verify that CRT is not being taught and our schools. And so it occurred to me that you must know what this is, and there wouldn't be any reason not to have a rule that it can't be taught, that is what the school board should be enacting, because your superintendent, in his letter, he says that he welcomes community engagement in the education of the youth, but allegations that BCSD is promoting and or teaching critical race theory distracts teachers and administrators from focusing on the important work of educating our students. So the way to have that not happen is to do what that teacher talked about already, but make it a rule that it can't be taught. We know it's divisive now. I know more about what it is. You most in the room probably know more than I do about it, but it's something divisive that we don't want, and there's no problem with having a rule that it cannot be taught. That has to be the case. That has to be what you would do on page 2, once you've determined the broad concerns within the community, and if you see evidence that critical theory is actually being taught, it cannot be. There must be a rule that it cannot be. This is what you must take up. Thank you.
Karen Lamb, you are the last one on my list.
Oh, dang it. I don't like mics. Okay, I'll just be sorry, online people. I didn't mean to not make you madder. My name's Karen Lamb. I've been sitting back there with almost tears in my eyes, nervous to do this, but I feel like I got to stand up for myself a little bit. I could stand up here and tell you all kinds of things that I believe, but that's not why I'm here. I listened to everyone tonight. I'm glad you're all here, because I think if you asked any of my students, and by the way, several of you have grandchildren and children that I have taught. So I want you to ask them who shows up for them. I show up. I'm here. I show up all the time, and I don't need a round of applause. I appreciate it, but I want you to hear what I'm saying. So you showing up, it matters to me. But I agree with Marcus. I want to have a conversation with you. I want us to teach kids how to treat each other well. And I want us to also recognize that that didn't happen the whole night tonight. And I'm sorry, I'm an emotional person. I am a graduate of this school. I returned here because of the people that helped me become the person I am. I'm the daughter of a Douglas County 30-year sheriff, and I believe in this valley. It means a lot to me. There are people here that would tell you that no one bleeds orange and black and Douglas High more than me. And there's a young lady right there who was my student. She'd tell you. I believe in this place, but I don't think that everything tonight was fair. And I apologize. I'm normally better. I talk in front of 1,700 kids and I'm fine. I agree in so many things. I just want to point out a few things. I hope no one's telling you that reading and writing isn't being taught. I'm an English teacher among the 18 other subjects I teach. And I'm teaching reading and writing every day. I'm teaching classic novels. Please don't tell them reading's not happening. Teenagers already don't like to read. I don't need more of that, okay? I also want to say that I think we could talk about the outside forces, and that's a conversation to have, but here in Douglas County, we're producing great human beings. They are smart. They're resilient. They're all kinds of the things that we want them to be as they go out in the world and they start a new generation of adults in Douglas County. And that's what I have to worry about. I have to worry about my school, my kids. I have to. That's my job. I heard a couple of things in SEL. I get it. I see it differently, but that's okay. We can disagree. But I just want to ask a question because I'm a teacher, so I thrive on participation. How many of you had a teacher at any point in your life who was impactful in your life? Just raise your hand for me. Okay, perfect. Great, because some of my teachers are in this room.
How many of them were impactful? Sometimes, not always academically. Can you raise your hand? Okay, about half of you, okay? I'm not a therapist. You are totally right. I don't want to be, trust me. However, when a kid comes to me crying, I have to listen and I have to help them problem solve. And I want to work with parents to help them. I didn't think I was going to be doing a job where I was spending hundreds of dollars in granola bars, but if that's what helps kids get to work, that's what helps them get to work. I will do whatever I can. I love kids. I want to be here for all kids. I want to do that, but I want to have a conversation. I want you guys to approach us. I'll take an email. I'll sit with you right now. I got to be back here in about, 8 hours, but I'm here. I stayed because I showed up. I just want you to know that there are great people in this, but this also helps create that divide. And let's not let it happen anywhere, in any way. And let's have a conversation. Because I've always been willing to have a conversation, always. And I'm going to tell you, I'm here for this reason, because I was taught that from these people. And I want us to grow. I think I can be, my motto, ask any of my leadership kids, I've told them for years. My goal every day is to be better the day I was before. So I hope tomorrow we wake up and we're all the best we can be, so we can model for kids that they can also be the best they can be. Thank you.
All right, well, I think Karen said it best, would be the best we can be. On that note, I would like to also thank you all for coming, for spending your night here, for talking what's on your heart and your literature, your mind, your everything. Have a good night and be safe. Sorry. I prematurely dismissed you, I believe. I'm sorry, everyone. Please come back together. I prematurely dismissed you.
I'm sorry, because this is an open meeting. We have to have one more public comment on anything other than CRT. So if anyone else would like to come up and speak on any topic other than CRT, raise your hand. And if not, we will adjourn. Is there anyone? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being here. Please travel safe home.